Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you a video today to compare all 5 knitted models currently on offer from Nike and Adidas. This includes the Mercurial Superfly 4, the Magista Obra, the Ace 16 Plus Pure Control, which is a laceless boot, the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, and the X15 Plus Primeknit. I did not include the Ace 15 Plus Primeknit or any of the Primeknit models prior to that, mainly because those have all been discontinued and aren't going to be readily available basically from here forward. And then of course I didn't include the Nike Hypervenom Phantom 2 either. It does have a Flyknit mid-cut collar, and of course it does have the Flyknit running through the midfoot, but the upper isn't actually made from Flyknit, so I chose not to include it in this video for I think fairly obvious reasons. So in this video we're going to compare all 5 knitted models currently on offer from really the 2 biggest brands in soccer at the moment. We're going to talk about what the differences are and hopefully allow you to make a little bit of a better decision if you are trying to decide on a knitted shoe as your next pair. So if you're interested in learning more, stick around, watch the entire video. We're going to cover pretty much everything. And with that being said, let's get right into the comparison. To start things off, let's talk about the uppers, how they all feel, and most importantly, how they actually compare to each other, because a lot of people are trying to decide on which knitted shoe they should buy. So obviously from left to right, I have the Superfly 4, the Ace 16 Plus Pure Control, which is of course the laceless boot. We have the Nike Magista Obra, we have the Adidas Ace 16.1 Primeknit, and we of course have the X15 Plus Primeknit, also from Adidas. So with these 5 shoes, the main 5 knitted shoes on the market right now that are current models, there's quite a bit of variation, which again, kind of surprising. So I would say the best way to kind of put it is if you want the thinnest, kind of closest to barefoot feel from any of these shoes, the Superfly 4 is the way to go. It has a Flyknit upper with a very, very thin construction, and then of course the structure comes from an internal support cage as well as the Brio cables that runs from the base of the sole into the lacing system. It has the Nike Skin polyurethane covering to it as well as ACC. So again, it's got the softness and flexibility you would expect from a knitted upper, but like I said, out of all 5 of these shoes, it definitely is the thinnest. Now, it doesn't really compare to anything else in regards to feel. The Superfly 4 is kind of a standalone, and so is the Ace 16 Plus Pure Control. A lot of people, just based on the kind of control aspect of the marketing with this shoe, they want to compare it to the Nike Magista Obra, which it's nothing like at all. And obviously you're going to compare it to the other Primeknit Ace model, the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, which honestly, side by side, the laced version and the laceless model, they're so much different from each other, it's not even funny. There's really no comparing this laceless boot to not only any of these knitted shoes, but pretty much anything else out there on the market. Yes, it does have a visibly knitted upper, but the entire inside of the shoe is lined in a relatively firm synthetic leather material, so you don't actually get to feel any of the knitted aspect of the upper. It provides a slightly cushioned touch on the ball, but the actual softness that you get, I guess, would compare more to something like a Nike Hypervenom Phantom 2 with its firmer, thin, synthetic Nike Skin upper, as opposed to something that is, I guess, sock-like on your feet and very, very flexible, which is what you would expect from something with a knitted upper. So you have all that structure from the inside lining material. You have all this structure from the Adidas stripes right here, which is basically just a firmer plastic material that doesn't really stretch. And the overall experience of wearing this shoe is relatively unique. There are some flaws associated with just a laceless system in general, not this particular shoe. And really, guys, if you want as much info as possible on what I think about the laceless Pure Control model from Adidas, check out my playtest video. I go over all the things that I really like about it and all the things that I'm not so crazy about, what I think are kind of major flaws with the design. And again, it's not necessarily the fault of this particular shoe, it's just the fact that it is laceless. Laceless shoes come with problems, and this is no different. So check out that video if you kind of want to learn more. As far as thickness is concerned, it's not really thick, it's not really thin, it's kind of right there in the middle, and it does have, just like I said, kind of a firmer, stiffer feel to it overall. So again, do not compare the laceless Pure Control to any of these other shoes because they are very, very different in the overall feel and experience of actually wearing them. Now, with the Nike Magista Obra, this is, in my opinion, if I'm picking the best performing knitted shoe right now, I think it's the Magista Obra. At least that's what I like. It performs very similarly to the Nike Mercurial Superfly 4, if I'm completely honest with you guys. But what I like about the Obra versus the Superfly, and this is purely a personal preference thing, is that this does have a more dense, slightly thicker Flyknit construction for the upper. It still has the Brio cables that run from the base of the sole into the lacing system, so lockdown and general stability is just as good. It has the Nike skin covering, ACC as well, but what's different about this shoe versus a Superfly is one, it's a different shape, so obviously the fit's a little bit different, just not quite as narrow or as tight fitting, I guess, is what you get from the Mercurial line, and it also does have a padded liner, so like I said, the touch you get on the ball, while I wouldn't consider it to be thick or leather-like by any means, it does have that slight amount of cushion to it, which again, I personally prefer in a soccer shoe. So if you're comparing the Superfly and the Obra, the major difference is going to be one, the fit, and two, the touch that it provides. If you want something thinner, go for the Superfly. If you want something more padded, go for the Nike Magista Obra. Now with the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, this I would say probably compares most closely to the Nike Magista Obra. And as far as overall comfort is concerned, I think that out of all the laceless models that I have right here, I personally find these to be the most comfortable. So you have a Primeknit upper that's very soft, very flexible, but there's not a lot of structure to it. All the structure comes from the Adidas stripes that you have going through the midfoot on the lateral and medial side. This is made from a stiffer material, so when you do pull those laces tight, you'll definitely notice that the shoe is very kind of locked down and stiffer through the midfoot, whereas in the forefoot and toe box area, there is more movement in the shoe overall. So in terms of responsiveness, it's not necessarily on par with what you can get from Nike at the moment, but in terms of general comfort, it's really good. Now, what makes this shoe distinctly different in the comfort area when compared to what Nike has on offer is the actual cut. Obviously, the Superfly and the Obra are mid-cut shoes, and technically, most people would consider to be the Ace 16.1 a mid-cut shoe as well. Although side by side, you can see the Superfly and the Obra are cut a little bit higher. The difference is the actual construction in the heel. With the Superfly and the Obra, it actually does have a unique construction that kind of plays into the fact that this is a mid-cut shoe. So it puts a little bit more pressure and slightly more discomfort on the heel of your foot, especially from right out of the box. It takes some getting used to, and you have to break them in a little bit more slowly, whereas with the knitted models from Adidas, whether it's the 16.1 Primeknit or actually the X15 Plus, not so much the laceless model, again, it doesn't really compare. This is essentially a low-cut shoe with a little extension piece. You can see how it is actually cut technically. It has a nice padded liner on the inside, very comfortable, and for the most part, this element, this aspect doesn't need to be there. It doesn't impact the feel of the shoe, and really if you had a blindfold on and somebody slid these on your feet, you would think it's just a regular low-cut shoe that had a really soft, flexible upper. So in regards to actual step and comfort, I will say that I think the Ace 16.1 Primeknit is my personal favorite from a comfort standpoint, but in terms of actual feel, I do prefer the Nike Magista Obra. So my favorite out of the bunch that I have right here, it'd be a toss-up between these two models. I kind of go back and forth depending on what my preferences are on that particular day. Now, the last model that I have to show you guys right here is, of course, the X15 Plus Primeknit. This is probably the least popular of all the knitted models on the market right now, but certainly not a bad shoe. This is a very good model, and I would say that if I had to pick a top 3 out of the bunch in terms of what I really like, it would be these 3 shoes. This is the only knitted model here that does have a standard normal low cut to it. As you guys can see, there's no extension piece. And it's a very comfortable shoe. It has pretty much the same consistent knitted pattern made from that Primeknit material all the way throughout the entire upper. And then again, just like the Ace 16.1, all the structure through the midfoot comes from this stiffer, thin material that they have fused across the midfoot on both the lateral and medial side. So a lot more structure through the midfoot. It's a little bit more open and more flexible in the forefoot area, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just not quite as responsive as what Nike currently has on offer with their Brio cable system. So overall comfort, really good. In terms of thickness, it's actually very similar to what you're going to get from the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, if not a touch thicker, but still relatively thin, still does have that sock-like kind of natural softness to it, a slight padded feel on the ball just because of the knitted nature of the actual synthetic itself. And again, it's a very comfortable shoe. If you're interested in the X15.1 at all, the X15 Plus Primeknit is a significantly better variation of that particular shoe, and just a good shoe in general, knitted or not. So again, as far as uppers go, they're all technically similar in that they are knitted uppers, but the actual feel that they provide is very different when you compare one to another. So again, if you want something super thin, Superfly is what I would recommend. If you want something a little bit more padded, any of these three models are really, really good. The Obra, the A16.1 Primeknit, or the X15 Plus Primeknit. And if you want something that is just a little bit strange and doesn't necessarily offer the softness of a knitted upper, but you're intrigued by the laceless design, then obviously the Pure Control is what you're interested in. As far as sole plate stud patterns and general traction is concerned, I really don't have any issues with any of these shoes. They're all very, very good in that regard. But really, if you're trying to decide between them, I think the feel should be the deciding factor, and the stud pattern is something that you can more or less get used to. But for the sake of just kind of doing a direct comparison, I'm going to talk about each individually, starting off with the Superfly 4, which is probably the most unique stud pattern of the bunch that I have right here. This is the only one that features what I would consider to be a true bladed stud pattern, and as you would expect from the Mercurial line, it's very aggressive in terms of just providing plenty of bite when pushing off in pretty much any direction. Of course, you get the carbon fiber sole plate as well, which looks very cool but doesn't really offer any kind of performance benefit. But again, if you've worn Mercurials in the past, it's very popular for the traction aspect of the shoe, and the Superfly 4 lives up to that particular high standard that the Mercurial line is really known for at this point. So for firm natural grass, really, really good stud pattern from the Superfly 4. Of course, it is available in an AG as well as an FG stud pattern as well. Now, sticking with Nike, we're going to move on to the Nike Magista Obra, which features a compressed nylon sole plate that's definitely a little bit thicker than what you're going to find on the Superfly. A little bit stiffer as well, but it does break in quite nicely. This does have the external one-piece heel counter, which is a nice little addition there. And then, of course, you get a stud pattern that is all conical studs, similar to what you get from the Tiempo line. And, of course, as a firm ground stud pattern, it does perform really well on natural grass. Despite the studs being fairly traditional with their rounded shape, they still dig into the ground quite nicely and provide pretty good bite, just not quite as aggressive as what you're going to get from the Mercurials. And again, just like the Superfly, you can get this with an SG Pro or an AG stud pattern. Now, if there's one, I guess, advantage, if you want to call it that, to getting an Adidas shoe right now over what you can get from Nike, is that all their current models are FG AG. So if you play on both firm natural grass as well as artificial grass, and you only want to buy one pair of shoes, all of their shoes, sole plates, and stud patterns are suitable for both of those surfaces. So you only have to buy one pair as opposed to two. So with Adidas and their Ace line, the Pure Control as well as the 16.1 Primeknit, they feature the exact same sole plate and stud patterns, a sprint frame, which we have seen from Adidas in the past with the external heel counter. So in that regard, a little bit similar to what you get with the Obra. It's a relatively flexible sole plate. It'll feel a little bit stiff at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly. And as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's pretty much the same layout that we've seen from Adidas for several years now, just with all conical studs. Not quite as long, not quite as aggressive as what you get from the Obra on firm natural grass, but you can use this on artificial grass as well. Didn't really have any issues using it on either plain surface, although I will say this definitely does come across as more of an FG stud pattern as opposed to a true AG stud pattern. For use on actual artificial grass, I do prefer a dedicated Nike AG sole plate and stud pattern versus the FG AG stud pattern from Adidas, but that's a personal preference thing, and again, it really depends on what your budget will allow for. Lastly, we of course have the X15 Plus Primeknit, which does have the sole plate and stud pattern from the X line. Again, it's FG AG from Adidas, and it's probably the stiffest of the bunch that I'm showing right here. It has thickness to it despite it looking like it has all these little cutouts. Basically, you have a plastic plate base that's covered up with the actual material from the upper just to give it a cool look, and then you have the stud plate that goes on top. So it's technically two layers of plastic, which, like I said, does have more thickness and stiffness than you might expect just based on how it looks. And then the stud pattern, again, it's pretty much the same layout as what you find on the Ace line in terms of the positioning of the studs, but instead of them being conical in shape, they are kind of this angled triangular shape. So again, the performance is really, really good on firm natural grass as well as artificial grass, although I would consider this to be more of a firm ground stud pattern as opposed to a true AG stud pattern. But that's pretty much it as far as traction is concerned. Again, you shouldn't have any issues with any of these shoes. And they'll all pretty much get the job done depending on what you're looking for and depending on what your preferences are. In terms of weight, all the current knitted models that are available are definitely on the lighter side. So I'm going to weigh them all for you today in real time using this scale. Keep in mind that they are all the exact same size. All of them except the Obra is a 9 US. The Obra is a 9.5 just because the sizing runs half a size small. Something we'll talk about more a little bit later in this video. But just keep in mind that they're all the same size technically, so this is a very fair comparison. And just for the sake of keeping things simple, I'm going to actually weigh them from lightest to heaviest of the 5 models. So the lightest shoe that you can get that is knitted is of course the Superfly 4. So we're going to throw these on the scale and you can see that they weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 196 grams, which is very lightweight on your feet. So change the scale back to ounces, pull these off, and we'll throw on the next shoe that is the lightest in the group, which is the Magista Obra. So we'll throw these on and you can see that they weigh in at 7.15 ounces, the equivalent of 203 grams. So just over about 0.25, 0.35 ounces more than the Superfly. They're very, very similar in weight. Not really a difference that you're actually going to notice either in hand or on feet. So of the 5 here, the 2 Nike models, the Obra and the Superfly, are definitely the lightest by almost a full ounce. So we'll change the scale back to ounces again, pull these off, and we'll throw on the next lightest shoe of the group, which happens to be the laceless Pure Control model. You can see that they weigh in at 8 ounces. So again, kind of a full ounce more from what's on offer from Nike, the equivalent of 226 grams. Still relatively light, but these shoes definitely do have a unique feel overall. I don't think the weight is something that you're going to be too worried about. We'll change the scale back to ounces, pull these off, and we'll throw on the next shoe, which is of course the A16.1 Primeknit. This is the model with the laces, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.1 ounces, so 0.1 ounces more than the laceless model, the equivalent of 229 grams, which essentially is nothing. There really isn't a weight difference between the two, and what difference there is so small that you're not going to notice it either in hand or on feet. And then finally, I'll change the scale back one more time, we have the X15 Plus Primeknit, which is the heaviest of the bunch. Throw it on the scale and you can see that they weigh in at 8.6 ounces, so about half an ounce more than the 2 other knitted models from Adidas. That's the equivalent of 244 grams. So again, still not a heavy shoe, it's still in the 8 ounce range, but of the 5, this one definitely does weigh the most. All right, so here is a look at the A16 Plus Pure Control on my left foot and the Nike Mercurial Superfly 4 on my right foot. Now I'm starting off with these two, not because I think they're similar to each other, because they aren't, but because these are the 2 shoes that are the most unique of the group when it comes to fit and feel. With the laceless Pure Control model, it really doesn't compare to anything else out there, period. Not just knitted shoes, not just synthetic shoes, not just leather shoes. It's, like I said, kind of a standalone model in terms of how it feels on your foot. The fit out of the box is okay, although I would make the argument that out of the 5 that we're talking about in this video, it just isn't the most comfortable. Not saying it's uncomfortable, but there are some issues when it comes to comfort in general, and that has to do with stability and lockdown, and that has to do itself with the laceless system, which again, this is a very complicated boot to explain, so if you want more info, be sure to go ahead and check out that playtest where I kind of go over all of the details. The fit is pretty good though, surprisingly, given that it is a laceless shoe. It's not really particularly wide. It definitely does have a tighter fit, especially through the midfoot, especially on the lateral side where you have the Adidas stripes. But for the most part, I think they will be suitable for most people. It's just the lack of adjustability due to the laceless system. So if you put them on your feet and you don't like how they feel, that's not going to change. You can't make them tighter, you can't make them looser. It's just how they are. That's the nature of a laceless system. So in terms of fit, again, it doesn't really compare to anything. It's kind of a standalone product. And if you're wondering about sizing, they do run true to size. In terms of the Superfly 4, of the 5 we're talking about in this video, this definitely does have the tightest kind of closest to the foot fit, no extra space on the inside whatsoever. But again, it's part of the Mercurial line, so you kind of expect that. It's got a tighter fit pretty much all the way through, which is not a bad thing by any means. Again, it kind of comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. You get lots of lockdown when you pull the laces tight from the internal supports, as well as the Brio cables that work directly with the lacing system. Like the mid-cut models from Nike, it does take some getting used to in terms of the break-in process in the heel, but as long as you take things slowly, don't wear them straight into a game or anything like that, you shouldn't have too many issues. Again, width-wise, not particularly wide, so if you have really wide feet, probably not the best option for you. And as far as sizing is concerned, they do run true to size. So if you are looking to order a pair, going true to size is what I would recommend. If you're gonna be comparing two knitted shoes out of the 5 in today's video, I really feel like these are the two that you need to compare. On my left foot, I have the Nike Magista Obra. On my right foot, I have a pair of Adidas Ace 16.1 Primeknits. Now, given that I just said these are probably the two most similar of the bunch that we're talking about in this video, they still are quite a bit different from each other in multiple different, I guess, aspects of the shoe. Like I mentioned earlier, the Obra definitely does have a thicker, more padded upper to it, whereas the Ace 16.1 definitely feels a lot thinner and more flexible, not quite as well supported. What you're gonna find with the Obra, as well as the Superfly for that matter, is that the overall fit and the way that the shoe wraps your foot is more consistent across the entire foot. It kind of has that all over tightness, that all over snugness. It's responsive all the way through. All the structure runs through the entire upper, whereas with the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, you can feel a difference in where the actual structure in the upper is, meaning that the midfoot's a lot firmer and a lot stiffer than what you're going to find in the forefoot, which is a lot looser, a lot more flexible, and just not quite as well secured on your foot, if that makes any sense. Now, I personally prefer the overall feel and the way that the Obra wraps your foot, but in terms of actual comfort, I will say that the Ace 16.1 is the more comfortable shoe out of the box, and that really has to do with the fit in the heel. Again, just like the Superfly, the Obra has a little bit of a stiffer feel, especially from right out of the box, so it's really, really important that you break them in slowly, take your time with them, as opposed to just wearing them straight into a game or something like that. Whereas the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, given that it's pretty much just a standard soccer cleat construction that happens to have this little extension piece, they feel pretty much normal from right out of the box. Just a really comfortable shoe that happens to have a knitted upper. As far as width is concerned, I would say that the Obra is actually a little bit wider through the midfoot than what you're gonna find from the Ace 16.1, at least in terms of how it wraps your foot. Whereas in the forefoot area, both of these shoes have some pretty decent width to them. As long as you don't have excessively wide feet, you shouldn't really have any issues fitting into either of these two models. And as far as sizing is concerned, the Ace 16.1 Primeknit does run true to size. I'm wearing my usual size 9 US, and the fit and length is perfect, whereas the Obra does run half a size small. So instead of wearing my usual size 9, I go up to a 9.5, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to order a pair of Obras, I'd recommend going a half size up. And if you're looking at the Ace 16.1 Primeknit, going true to size is the way to go. Lastly, we have the X15 Plus Primeknit from Adidas, which obviously I have on my left foot, side by side with the Ace 16.1 Primeknit on my right foot. Now, I know I said that the Ace 16.1 Primeknit and the Obra compare very well, but obviously, being that these are both from the same brand, both with Primeknit uppers, these two shoes are actually pretty similar to each other as well in quite a few different aspects. Obviously, with the Primeknit construction, they're pretty similar. They're both very soft, very flexible. They have that natural kind of sock-like sensation. The big difference that you're gonna find between these two shoes is that the X15 Plus Primeknit definitely does have a thicker Primeknit upper, So if you do want a slightly more padded feel on your foot and a padded feel on the ball, you're gonna get that more so from the X15 Plus than you will from the 16.1 Primeknit, so keep that in mind. As far as structure through the midfoot is concerned, it feels a little bit more evenly dispersed on the X15 Plus, just because obviously it spans a larger surface area than what you have with the Adidas stripes. So you do get more stiffness and more tightness through the midfoot than you will in the forefoot area that obviously doesn't have the same reinforcement, but it doesn't feel quite as as pinpoint pressure areas like you have with the Adidas stripes, so you can actually feel the exact Adidas stripe against your foot. This feels a little bit more even, which you could argue is more comfortable, especially from right out of the box, but I really didn't have any discomfort issues with either of these two shoes. Given that this is a low-cut model with a standard synthetic leather liner in the heel, the fit is perfectly normal, no break-in time really required. They feel pretty good from right out of the box. As far as width is concerned, I will say that this does fit a little bit more narrow than what you're going to find from the A16.1, but for the most part, they're pretty similar shoes. Obviously, a little bit more stiffness in the sole plate, like I talked about earlier. And as far as sizing is concerned, they do run true to size. We're in my usual size 9 US, so if you are looking to order a pair for yourself, I would recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. All right, guys, that is it for my comparison video of all the knitted models currently on offer from Nike and Adidas. I know a lot of you guys always like to ask in these videos, which is my favorite of the bunch. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, I have kind of a toss-up between the Nike Magista Obra and the Adidas A16.1 Primeknit for my personal favorite. What I really like about the Obra is the way it feels on your foot, the way it performs, and ultimately the type of feel that it provides on the ball. I'm a really big fan of that particular knitted upper. It would be my favorite of the bunch. But when it comes to actual comfort and just the way the shoe feels on your foot, I'm also a really big fan of the A16.1 Primeknit. I find that shoe personally to be the most comfortable for me. So again, it really is for me a toss-up between the Obra and the A16.1 Primeknit, but really all of these shoes have something unique on offer when it comes to fit and feel. And again, it's really important to match up your own personal preferences with what I've described in this video, and hopefully the details that I went over help you to make a more informed decision on which of these 5 shoes is going to be best for you personally. As always, guys, if you have any questions at all regarding any of the shoes in today's video, leave those questions down below in the comment section. I definitely will get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed today's video, found it helpful and informative, be sure to support it with a like. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information linked in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. As always, thanks for watching.